I'm Caroline Haskard. I'm a businesswoman from Wattlecamp. I've been a landowner there for 27 years and currently I am the fire warden for the district after spending 7 years as a deputy fire warden. The community. I've been asked for more than a decade by various members of the South Burnett community to run for council because I've long been an advocate for many issues concerning and affecting the community with a wide-ranging interests, and the requests have actually increased over the years. I believe I stand with the majority of community. I'm completely and utterly against this mine. What I intend to do about it is offer my services to the Kingaroy Concerned Citizens Group in respect of the Environmental Impact Statement, better known as an EIS. I've performed these many times for multiple projects before, and I know exactly what's required to achieve the best outcomes for the community, and I would recommend that that's the way we go. The very first thing I stand for is to improve our information technology resources and services here. I don't actually believe that in many instances they are appropriate and sufficient for most business needs, and I'm speaking from personal experience here. The second thing that I would like to see done is infrastructure prioritised to support business needs here, existing businesses and the development of new businesses. I would lobby very hard to get our fair share of the funding, training opportunities, more apprenticeship opportunities, and certainly some more support to expand existing businesses and to generate interest for new businesses here. Oh, the stunning landscapes. It's just a beautiful place to be, whether that's natural areas or our farming landscapes that we look at. I think there's high visual amenity here, and that is what brings tourists to the place. And the sense of community in so many of our smaller towns particularly, very welcoming, very happy atmosphere, and tourists love it. I wouldn't say there were negatives. In my opinion, I tend to see things more in shades of grey than black and white. I will lobby very hard if I was elected, certainly with my fellow councillors, to see improved facilities here for tourists. We need to have more parking, it needs to be well signed, and certainly if we can find a way to support our businesses to provide their services all over weekends as well for tourists, that'd be wonderful. I can't speak to the specifics of when the road might be graded because I don't tend to travel the Bunya Mountains that way, but I do periodically go for a drive that way just to consider the state of the road. I'm personally very disappointed that the main feature in the South Burnett and our southeastern gateway isn't a bitumen dual lane carriageway. I believe personally that should have been done 30 years ago. I'm familiar with the Nanango Weir. I've visited it several times some years ago, obviously prior to it being locked. My understanding it's locked because of the road. It's not safe enough and it would cost too much money at this point in time to upgrade that road and put in facilities, toilets, etc. I would certainly support moves to do that, and in fact I believe it could be a major tourist draw card here. It is an absolutely beautiful place, full of wildlife, including platypus that you can see at most times of the day. I believe that we could increase our advertising program, that we could offer an incentive program through council to some of our businesses that could certainly do with a bit of a facelift, could be a hand up, not a handout, and I think that we could improve the condition of the public facilities available to tourists and certainly increase our parking, clean up the place, like litter on the roadsides, just the general aesthetics of the area. We need to consider, I believe, that tourists generally travel very, very widely and they have a certain level of expectation, and we need to meet that. The Bunya Mountains, Nanango Town, Cassis at Bowie, the Moffatdale Wineries, and the Boondooma Dam Speedwell Range area near Proston. I'm aware crime rates are fairly high around here, very serious. I will try very, very hard to ensure that we have increased employment opportunities here and training and education opportunities. People who are occupied generally tend to commit less crime, and I would think that if we can also develop some rehabilitation centres here, that could help our people as well. I've heard that Kingaroy has something like the 4th highest needle exchange program in the state. I'm not sure what the current statistics are on that, whether we've gone higher or lower as a region, but this ties back to my previous answer. Through increased employment opportunities, training and education opportunities for people here, I would hope that would assist to reduce crime. It's not actually a local government matter, but that's what I would try to do personally. And I would also lobby very, very hard for a rehabilitation centre here versus methadone outlets, stuff like that, to try and help people reform. I'm personally aware, Daniel, that we have quite a serious domestic violence problem here. I'm also aware that lobbying has finally produced some goods, with CTC in Kingaroy is set to receive $935,000 in funding for counselling services and for in-court support services in Nanango, Mogan, Cherbourg and Kingaroy, and that I believe will be very, very helpful. We've been advised so far by Council that ratepayers will be funding the private hospital. I don't believe that we should be, though. I will lobby very, very hard to see that we receive our due funding here from state and federal governments for our public facilities. We have not, I believe, been receiving our due funds here to increase and expand the facility and the programs offered and services offered. I believe the private hospital has been a political football that has interfered very strongly in the advancement of our public facility. Yes, I will. I'm not a health professional by any means. I have very little knowledge about the industry. I will be seeking input immediately from the local medical professionals here to help me and other people put together what we need as a bid to go forward to seek the services and professional health provision that we need here in this region. For me, that's connected to the previous question. Again, I would engage and consult the local medical professionals here, because they are the people that have the knowledge of where we need to go and perhaps the funding that we could tap into to expand the services here. I know we have an enormous need, and we certainly need to work very hard to seek additional funds here to support our community and meet the needs of our community. I don't believe that's being done at the moment. I don't know that we have more or less of a cultural issue than any other region in Australia. Certainly from a local government perspective, I'm not quite sure what we could do to improve that, other than look at licensing and business hours for venues that serve alcohol. I don't believe what we do as a community provides sufficient support with people that suffer from addiction, whether it's alcohol or any other. Certainly what I would do, again, is lobby very, very hard to seek funds for increased services here to support the community. I agree, there is a budget crisis. Certainly at the moment our deficit is $66 odd million here, which is around about the same as our annual operating budget in council. The situation needs to be looked at very, very closely for efficiencies. For example, more than $25 million of the annual operating budget goes on wages, and I would think that staff ratios, internal, external, are a big criteria. I think that they could prioritise their investment to match business needs, tourism destinations, and certainly, while we are in a debt crisis, cut all non-essential travel for staff and councillors. We could look at changing the vehicle fleet and save $1 million immediately. Absolutely. The account books at council, as in every other item of business in council, is meant to be available to the community at all times. The statutory limits provide the demand of council to be open, transparent and accountable. 100% for transparency. Absolutely. In saying that though, I do understand as a business person myself the requirements of commercial in confidence. So, for example, with tender processes, we do not necessarily need to know who the company was early on or what the exact figures were, but I do believe it is council's duty to advise the community why they have selected the tenders that they have. E.g., not always is the lowest price the best, not always is the highest price the best. There has to be sound reasons why someone has been selected for some of the very large tenders that are put out around this region. I would like to ensure that ratepayers have access to the information for what their rates are being spent on. E.g., the road levy. At the moment, council cannot tell us where that is being spent or how it's being spent or if it represents good value for money. It is simply lumped into the general rate and we are advised it is expended. I think there's probably always opportunities for efficiencies in any business structure. I would think that efficiencies could come back to some of the things that I mentioned earlier. For example, we could change the fleet of vehicles that council uses, would spend less money provided it didn't cost more money to maintain and service those vehicles than a previous fleet. We can certainly look at staff efficiencies. I know that here in the South Burnett our ratio of internal staff to external staff is extremely large and disproportionate, and I would like to see that adjusted through natural attrition, hopefully over time, so that we can become more functional. I will do my very best to abolish the road levy. My understanding is that levies are reviewed annually by councillors and a decision is made whether they remain or go. So despite adverse information released to the public, shall we say, it's certainly the case that an incoming council would have the option to can the road levy. I think it's tragic, actually, the state of our rural roads. I repeatedly hear from council that we are an agri-focused economy here, and yet those people are the ones that seem to be missing out the most when they contribute the most to rates. The road network is dreadful. Yes, the roadsides are hardly ever slashed. Potholes are not repaired properly the first time they're repaired. In fact, added to that, we have council workers driving over potholes to fill potholes. And as for the waste management facility, well, unless I knew exactly where the landholder was who posed that question, it would be difficult for me to answer. But in general, it is not always possible to locate those types of services within 15 minutes of everybody. When they finally get the message that community's been sending them, when they finally begin to listen, when we have representatives on council who actively consult and engage with the community and actually take on board what the community needs. That's what I believe. We certainly need some changes, I also believe, in our engineering department, because the quality of work is certainly not there. It has not been demonstrated to my satisfaction as a ratepayer anywhere that I care to look in the South Burnett. Well, regardless of whether the mine goes ahead, to answer the first part of the question, Daniel, is parking is already inadequate everywhere we look. There are some spaces in Kingaroy, certainly behind some of the businesses, near the rail line, for instance, where there could be some upgraded spaces and to be utilised for parking. If we should end up with a mine here, which I personally will do everything I can to prevent, then we would have to look at that further down the track, but there's certainly facilities close to where the mine might go that already has parking that's underutilised, for example, at the airport and at the DPI research station. There are various levels of responsibility for the roadsides, depending on whether it's a main road network, secondary road or local road. Certainly it is not the residents' responsibility to maintain roadsides. That is council's responsibility, either directly because they manage secondary and local roads, or as trustees on behalf of the state government, which is the Department of Transport and Main Roads. An annual budget's provided to council from Main Roads to maintain those, and this year it is 1.6 million, just a little bit over 1.6 million. I'm not sure what council's allocated to roadside maintenance for their residents on rural and secondary local roads, but it comes right back that council should be maintaining them. In this current budget, it's a little over $16.6 million. Great question. It's certainly a question that I have posed personally to council many times. Like a lot of other members of the community, I'm questioning where that money's being spent, how and why, and particularly more so when we see sections of road repeatedly repaired, we're not getting value for money. What I would like to see council provide is a clear plan and prioritisation of where those works are occurring, and should I be elected to council, one of the first things I would be looking for as a computer-based mapping person, I would be looking for the mapping layer immediately to show me where that money is going to be spent out of this year's budget and why. I can't answer that in any way, I'm sorry, because I'm external to council and I have not been able to access that type of information. What I can say, though, with some knowledge, is that our number of road crews have been reduced, and more as I travel around the region for my work, I see contractors and trucks and machinery from elsewhere. Whether they're local contractors, I'm not sure, but certainly a lot of work is being outsourced. I'd love to have a go at changing the current allocation process for a start. We don't even really know what that is. So I would like to see prioritisation, as I indicated earlier, of infrastructure development and maintenance more tailored to suit key tourist destinations and existing businesses and business development opportunities. Furthermore, in the way that I've seen, as has everybody else around here, roads repeatedly repaired, I would like to see more local contractors secure those tenders, and I would like to see the number of road crews increased on council, because I have a clear understanding that people that live in a region have a commitment to a region, and it's not about just taking the money and walking away. They must stand by their work, and the locals will do that. My vision for education in the South Burnett is to see it expand and real, meaningful opportunities for training be provided here so that locals don't have to travel externally. As a accredited trainer and assessor with multiple certificates and diplomas, there's an awful lot of training that I personally could deliver, but the courses aren't offered here. It's a real shame. In regard to CQU, I think it's absolutely wonderful that they're coming here, and if we can have some sort of open campus, I would support it to the hilt to try and expand those educational opportunities. Everything in my power to support seeking extra funding and training opportunities. I'd also like to do an analysis, really, of that demographic of our community to see exactly what they believe their needs are and what they think their employment opportunities are here, so that we can retain our youth. It's fundamental that we do, and we're not going to do it without education and employment opportunities. So it's not something that we could just say we're going to do. It really, again, requires analysis so that we can tailor what we offer more to the needs. So it's actually real life. That's a great question. My thoughts on that, I'd support it to the hilt. I'm actually a resident here that is not connected to the grid. I have standalone solar power and it's absolutely fabulous, and I believe it's an efficiency that we must move towards, not just for local government but for all of community. But as for council, as soon as possible. I would have a look at mapping to see where those allotments are, where those properties are, see what uses they might have. For example, some might be close to the industrial estate, some might be closer to agricultural areas, depending. So I would analyse the potential opportunities for those allotments and make a decision based upon that. In relation to the environmental side of the thing, I would like to see us step up here our land management practice and take better control over pests and, well, that's weeds for me, and feral animals. And certainly I believe council has a duty, because of the biosecurity laws, to do a little bit more about infringement notices to perhaps motivate some landholders to attend to their problems, because we end up having those impacts travel beyond boundary fences to other landholders. For example, I personally am repeatedly having mother of millions come onto my property from my neighbouring property. I've reported that to council on numerous occasions and nothing's been done, and yet it's a class 2 pest and it should be treated. I think that we have almost untapped potential here for renewable energy, and the community really needs to push local government and state and federal government to ensure that we capitalise on the opportunities that exist now and things that are going to come our way. For example, the Porters Gap wind farm, absolutely fabulous. I've listened to council speak previously about biodiesel, nothing's ever happened. There's the opportunity from that earlier question that we're well aware of regarding solar energy on rooftops. As far as I'm concerned, it should have been in place a decade or more ago. I'd grant it immediately. Well, I'm not a constitutional solicitor, so I can't really answer that in any great detail. I think that all groups should be considered for inclusion, but there may be some legal reason that I'm unaware of for that particular clause in the Constitution now. So for me, it's something that I would need a professional to workshop me through so that I would have clear understanding from which I could readily make a decision. I'd love to provide that to our Indigenous brethren. It's long overdue, and their recognition, I'd like to give it to them as soon as I could. On a personal level, there is no gap for me. I have long associations with Indigenous people, training, work, education, otherwise. More on a local government level, Cherbourg has been made its own council. Certainly I would like to see closer consultation and engagement with Cherbourg so that we could work better to support their needs. I think for a start that they could develop some apps for mobile phones, although the only rider to that is our rather appalling rural mobile network and service. However, most of us live on the fly today and we can't live without our mobile phones. It's our entryway to the world, our doorway to the world, and council needs to capitalise on that, I firmly believe. Otherwise, with existing technology, with the council's website, etc., design needs to be improved and simplified so that we can actually find what we're looking for. Yes, I certainly think that things could be more streamlined. I think, for example, you go into council or you call council and you speak to a particular admin person or an officer. I believe that that officer should follow up the entire trail of your request or documentation trail, however it may be. What is happening at the moment is you will have an entry point with one person, then you go to another person, then you go to another person, then you submit your follow-up documents online, and even with a reference number they can't find it. So continuity of contact, a little bit like evidence trails with police. It's that continuity that absolutely maintains the integrity of the response. Absolutely. Unequivocally, yes. From my standpoint, I've not long ago hooked up to wireless NBN, and it's probably certainly the fastest internet speed I've ever had, but there's plenty of glitches. It goes in and out. Mobile service is terrible, as I mentioned just before. We really, if we're going to attract new businesses here, it comes right back to that earlier question. Those services need to be in place to support the function and operations of modern business. I do. Sooner rather than later would be a great thing. However, due to lack of access to IT services here in the South Burnett in many regions, and in conjunction certainly with education opportunities, I think that that could take a generation to phase out entirely, but I would hope it would be sooner. I don't have any. I'm an independent. My life experience and certainly my education that has supported and enhanced my life experiences across a range of industries. I come from a farming background, so agribusiness, absolutely. Then the family moved more into retail business. When I first entered the workforce, I was in retail. Then I went into tourism and hospitality for 20 years, mostly in international resorts and private business clubs, high-level catering and function centres. After that, I moved back into the farming sector prior to coming to the South Burnett, where I became an environmental consultant. One of the first things that happened here after arriving in the South Burnett was a piece of legislation came in called the Vegetation Management Act, and I was elected to be a community representative on a state planning committee. 4 years I represented the community on that committee. Since then I've had various board representation positions as directors, etc., running my own business, advocate for community in a range of not-for-profit organisations. I believe that I have at least 16 years representational experience operating and working with all levels of government. I've worked for numerous local governments as an employee and a consultant. I certainly am across how processes work, some of the procedures for sure, and certainly experience in negotiating around the table. No. This is a contentious issue for community, but certainly from my perspective and with a little bit of knowledge and experience, I think for any dedicated councillor, potentially it's average, certainly not overpaid in any way. That realm belongs to the staff. Immediately, personally, I would begin that from the perspective that I'm an independent. I have absolutely no connections to any existing systems, no buddy networks, no debts to anybody. Nobody can call in any favours. But to secure absolute transparency, for me, the number one way is to take community with me into council, because that guarantees transparency and reduces corruption immediately. Being open, transparent and accountable is the way to stop corruption dead. I'd encourage more people to act the way that I do. I welcome everybody. I engage with people individually. I don't have preconceived likes or dislikes. I'm not prejudiced. Getting to know people is a journey of discovery. And I believe that everyone in Australia and around the world deserves equal opportunity and common decency. I would like to see all council staff have current workplace health and safety training and go through an audit process at least on an annual basis. Every day I see things in the street, I hear things from residents about council workers perhaps taking some shortcuts that result in injuries to community, to people and their vehicles. It must change, and I will support that change and bring that right out in the open. Pathological negativity, you've hit the nail on the head. For me, it is directly associated with lack of education and training. The world has moved on and we need to move with it. We need to be up to speed with current practice. How could we possibly generate business interests here if we're operating 50 years in the past and go and she'll be right, mate? Because she's not right, mate. The world is a different place. I would seek continually opportunities for people to be trained, to bring up their level of understanding to the modern time.